evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's artwork series. This is the 8th season of Artwork, a series in which we bring innovative artists to Lang to talk about the artistic process. I'm Bonnie Marranca, the curator of the series and a professor of theater at Lang. Tonight our guests are Caden Manson and Gemma Nelson, who founded the experimental performance company known as Big Art Theater in 1999. Together, they have created more than a dozen works, including Flicker, House of No More, The Sleep, and Broke House. When I say they have created these performances, I mean that in the fullest sense. Design, video, costumes, text, direction. So, in effect, this is an all-encompassing artistic and business effort, creating and managing a group of artists, putting the pieces together, fundraising, touring, giving workshops, lecturing, speaking on panels, writing articles, and touring here and abroad. The life of today's artists requires many skills and modes of communication. Besides working on Big Art Group, Caden Manson also established the Contemporary Performance Network, which is a social media platform where artists, festivals, presenters, and others can exchange resources and collaborations. And recently, he became head of the graduate program at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. From time to time, both Gemma and Caden write articles for theater publications. One of these pieces was a manifesto called After Spectacularity, published in 2012. Here they refer to Big Art Group as coders of reality, an unfixed, non-locatable assembly. The work of this company pushes the boundaries of audience, spectacle, and media in our era of transforming technologies, mixing pop culture, classics, film, and literary references in live events that are often characterized by what they call real-time film. We've recently had a number of artists in the artwork series talk about media and performance and the way it challenges conventional modes of understanding. What's been especially valuable in the introduction to the work processes that artists now use to achieve their goals. They are learning how to create new tools all the time, just as they are educating audiences and experiencing the simultaneity of events that now define the performance experience. What makes a work new? That word is usually present in conversations about art. Does newness matter? How does one recognize it? A few years ago, I invited Caden and Gemma to address the idea of what it means to be contemporary for a special anniversary issue of PAJ, the journal I edit. Here's what they wrote. Reality is bankrupt. Contemporary global culture has shifted radically in concert with innovations in technology in areas of communication, information, language, image, economy, presence, democracy, and environment. As artists working in the field of contemporary performance, we have a unique opportunity and responsibility to create aesthetic responses to these issues through the media of liveness, and to create a space for critical thought. Our strategies of transgression, queerness, political engagement, and exploitation of technology allow us to become slippery, ever-changing in form, and continuously redefining our state. We are streaming fluctuations in gender, race, and sexuality. We are 100 channels at once. We are corrupt code tempting you to connect with the diaspora of bodies without borders and self-defining realness. Well, guys, we're all yours and ready to be corrupted, okay? So please welcome Gemma and Caden.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you very much for having us here. I'm Gemma, this is Caden, and we're going to trade off lecturing today. And we're going to tell you a little bit about the company, how we started it, when we started it, our history, and show you some of our projects, as well as talking about what the activities that we're doing now and the, as Bonnie mentioned, the contemporary performance and some other activities that we're up to. So we began Big Art Group in 1999. We conceived the ensemble as a flexible structure with many entrances and exits so that collaborators could come and go as they needed. From the beginning, we wanted to rethink the idea of the ensemble, of the theatrical ensemble or the performance ensemble, both to adapt to particular pressures of creating in a place like New York, but also as a structure that would reflect our artistic practice. So we wanted to make a very flexible structure that could allow people to come and go as they needed and to contribute what they wanted and just pieces of what they wanted. The goals that we set out for the company was to create a contemporary language for the stage. Now, this sounds like a simple targeted goal, but we are playing here with some of the key ideas here. As Bonnie mentioned, our idea of what is contemporary is complicated by how we see ourselves in the present moment, how we see ourselves directed towards the future and our recent past, and even how we see ourselves existing in nowness. When we speak about language, we're talking about methods of communication of coded and encoded language and decoding language and confusion, messages that are interrupted and not arriving at their destination, and some things about information and information theory. So we're thinking beyond, I just want to point that out, we're not thinking just in terms of theatrical text when we say language, but a larger idea of language. When we speak about for the stage, we're talking not just about the theatrical space, but the larger stage of presence and performativity. A richer description of the goals that we set for ourselves is this text here. Unlike traditional theatrical performance, Big Art Group's extended mediated performances reposition viewers into active editors, challenging audience members to problem-solve complex issues of sexuality, race, narrative, and truth as a theatrical mirror to the process of navigation through contemporary society. We're not necessarily interested in the new, but more in the now. We wanted to task ourselves with thinking critically about what we could say of our contemporary experience and how our praxis or way of working would reflect the issues that we wanted to discuss. When we're staging a work, we want to short-circuit the audience's way of seeing and ask them to look at the complex structure of image and meaning and the manufacture of those images and that meaning. This is shelf life now.
Hi, my name is Caden Manson. I'll just repeat that again. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the works that we're doing. Most of these are historical works of Big Art Group. Shelf Life was from 2001. It was the beginning of us using what we call real-time film, which is not real, and it's not real-time, and it's not film at all. This piece is, so I said this piece is the beginning of the trilogy. You know, as a society, we're voracious image eaters. We can't get enough of the visual stimuli. At the same time, we're told that images are worthless. They're garbage. Don't pay attention to them. But, you know, we look, we see, we discard and forget. But do we think about where these images come from, who makes them, who decides to frame them, and what lays just beyond the frame? And that's a concern of Big Art Group, and it's also a concern of the real-time film. This piece is about a sort of love triangle in a way. It's three people, yeah?
Just press to keep the bullets coming out.
Oh, real-time film, there you go. Actor as technology. This piece was about the act of looking and how that act can be an act of consuming. And it's three characters who are covered a hyper-consumer. It's this kind of, Vivian Bang plays the main character, this blonde, who sort of just appears in the lives of these three other characters, and is kind of one of those Hollywood masks. She just reflects. She's just a screen, and they all project what they need onto her. And it ends in it climaxes in a landfill where they rip her apart. I'm just going to show you this, and then we'll talk a little bit about the setup for real-time film, or these first two in real-time film.
Shopping! Did you know that some stores say they have the best everything, but they don't?
Frankie, there was this guy. Should I put that in your room for you?
Oh, okay.
What is this? What's all this crap? newspapers? I told you to put those on the recycling pile. Why do you still have them?
Well, you said.
Is this last week's garbage? What the hell do you need that for?
Well, I wanted to see. You said that people throw away all sorts of stuff, so I just.
So what is this? This is junk, okay? You don't need all this crap, do you? I work in this shit. Did you bring this back from my work?
Some of it. What's wrong, Wendy?
You have to get rid of it, Frankie.
No!
You need to get it out of here, okay? You need to get it out of here.
No, but why? I need it. I need some of it. I'm looking
It's
for
crap,
something.
Frankie. It's garbage. You need to throw it away.
No, but I can't. And you said the garbage isn't just trash. You said.
Oh my God.
I can't throw it away, Wendy. I can't.
Are you wearing my shoes?
These ones? I think I got it from your closet. They say Gucci on them. I got this belt, too.
Why have you been going through my things? And why have you been bringing all this
Well, I
shit
thought
into
you
the-
didn't like synthetic things. You're always saying how much you like natural things, so I thought you wouldn't mind if I borrowed it.
Yeah, but look, I got those secondhand, okay? I mean, it's not like I'm... Ah!
Frankie, what the hell was that?
Oh, it's just Wendy.
Is that my Speedo? Frankie, did you get that from the car?
Maybe. I think so.
Frankie, I need to talk to you.
Whoa, Frankie, what's going on here?
The hell is he talking about?
Hey, I think we need to go talk this over at my place.
What?
Frankie, I really need to talk to you right now, Frankie. Are you... What does he want?
I need to talk to Frankie at my place.
I mean right now, Frankie.
Hey, we need to go. We need to leave.
I'll get it. Hello? Oh, hi. No. Right now? Okay, fine.
Who was that?
I have to go out. I'll be back later.
Where are you going?
I have to go out. I'm meeting a friend.
Oh, who?
Friend, I need to talk to
Hey!
you, Frankie, but I just...
Hey!
James! He says he needs to meet me. It's really urgent.
That's it. You're coming with me.
Get your hands off her.
Frankie, we're out.
I don't give a fuck.
Come on.
Get your hands off her.
Hey!
Get the fuck out. I said, get the fuck out of here.
I should go.
Frankie, I didn't say you could bring Max or James over here.
I should go. James is meeting me?
Oh, yeah? James came by today, and he wants to take your things.
What?
Yeah,
What do you mean, take my things?
he wanted to take them. I don't know. He was trying to take them, and he said that you and he...
So just quickly, the setup for this, it's, as I mentioned before, I said, the actor is the technology and big art group. We don't do a lot of focus on the objects of technology. So we have these 3 cameras, which are right here. There's 1, 2, 3, and then those are directly routed to these projectors, which are then manually focused so that they line up. And then we built sort of this backdrop so that we can, so the eye connects these as one long image. And we just turn the technology on, and the actors do their role, which is a lot of times simulating what the camera might do, or this sort of made-up camera. So they do pans and zooms and tilts and all those things, but the camera never moves. And also, so we're playing with this idea of this chasm between the frames, right? What is in between these frames? And then our company is multi-gendered, multiracial, multi-gendered and multiracial, and so you have these characters that are cyborgs, right? They only exist with this technology, and they're made up of the different people in our company. So sometimes you don't really have it in here, they're more flipping between the two, but sometimes you have these characters who then become sort of Asian, African American, white, male and female at the same time, and it begins to flutter. A lot of times the audience will laugh at these things. We don't really think they're that funny, but I think it's the shock of that sort of flipping back and forth and the wigs that cause that sort of reaction of laughing. Flickr is the second, it's the sister piece to this. We kept the same, setup. We just took the backdrop and turned it upside down. And then we, right. Then we made sort of two pieces, two different stories. One's called fiction and one's called nonfiction. And we were thinking about the idea of cutting and how media editing is violent. Oh, the act of looking is an act of violence. We were using, we were using the tropes of horror movies and also contrasting that with sort of psycho-torture. So we're using this sort of fictionalized narrative of horror and torture, which was, at the time, this is 2002, there are all these teenage movies, Lost in the Woods, everyone's getting hacked to death, so we made one of those films. And then we made another script which was more about three friends or ex-lovers and future lovers, another sort of triangle, sort of torturing each other. They're like roommate situations. And, but also dealing with this idea of editing and violence. And the work was about sort of entertainment versus empathy between the two. I'm going to show you the opening sequence. You'll see some of the same kind of edits that we used in the first one. And then I'm going to show you backstage. It's a bird's eye shot, so you can see actually how we make it. And these are the opening titles.
Became a nightmare.
So this is the top down. I might stop it so I can just show you where, where everything is. quickly, here's the screen. It's made of twin white, so the actors, the performers can see through it, so they can adjust their blocking and their sight lines. A lot of times characters, the actors aren't actually looking at each other. They're looking off in distant places, but their characters are looking at each other. Here are the 3 cameras. These are the shot marks. We call this positive space, which is the space that the camera catches. They have close-up, medium shot, and far shot. And then this is the sort of negative space, or the obscene space, the space that's off camera but on stage. Right, and then so this is the opening where they're running. So you'll see them sort of move throughout here. All the actors play the main character in the first and also the end. So you get the idea. Just a couple of things I want to point out that we think of these works as failure machines. So it's just failure after failure. There's hundreds of French entrances and exits of the characters coming in and out, and it's impossible for them to match up. So we were trying to sort of show those failures, and also to talk about this idea of passing. So using, like for instance, when one character crosses the screen, it takes three actors to do that in front of the cameras, and they have to contort their bodies so much to make it look real that when making this, that's one thing I was thinking about was, how can we embody this practice of passing and the complications of trying to pass? Yeah, those are 2 things I wanted to add. Do you want to talk?
Yeah, well, I can lead into hospital.
Yeah. There's the mouse.
So you might have a little bit of an idea from those first 2 works that we showed how we were thinking first in terms of maybe a storyline or thinking of a filmic practice and complicating that with the viewers of showing you the making of and the making at the same time, of replicating the characters even within that framework of having 3 characters appear at once or splitting them apart, and then having 2 storylines that interact. And when we got to House of Nemours, we started to break that apart even more. So House of Nemours was, again, the 3rd part of this trilogy, and it was the idea of the construction of an image as an exercise in world building. And this was a response to political events that were happening at the time, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and talking about how to construct new democratic worlds in societies. At that time, we came across a quote from Philip Dick, which was, and he said this in the mid-'70s, he said, when you're talking about technology, people often talk about paranoia. And they think about being paranoid as someone is watching you. And he said very presciently, well, there will come a time when it isn't they're spying on me through my phone anymore. Eventually it will be my phone is spying on me. And it's funny to think how commonplace that is to us nowadays, that we don't think about Google now following us and making predictions, and we don't think about all the embedded cookies in our browsers that are helping us shop and helping us decide what it is that we want or showing us only what we want. It's been a very rapid change from a world where we didn't have this kind of pervasive surveillance to the world that we live in today. At the time, I'll just go into a little bit of the history. It was also the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle, and there were these stories that summer about, in August, which is normally a slow news month, about children being kidnapped. And suddenly it was an epidemic on the TV about little girls that were being missing. And you can sort of see this as a proxy for America's loss of innocence, of going back to war and thinking about, well, you know, we have to save the kids, or where's our child gone? In this storyline, as much as it was, we had Julia, which was a mother who claimed that her little daughter had gone missing, and she was trying to enlist the help of a press person, of a newspaper writer or a TV reporter, into helping her solve the problem. But as the story progressed, it became more and more complicated, and the story, each act took on a different color, and the Julias split over the course of the performance event into 3 Julias that then began chasing each other into this kind of existential chase sequence. The screens also divided. We no longer stayed with the format that you saw in Shelf Life and Flickr, and they moved and finally collapsed onto themselves, and we'll show you that. Well, you can see this is from the end of the piece, so you can see that the images are starting to be layered, but you're seeing through the image to the performers that are still making it. But the beginning of the piece was this green screen set, where you were able to see both the performers, the screens, and the props and puppeteering that were going on, the video puppeteering. And
This is a scene, literally, I think she just is going to the bathroom. She's answering a phone and she's running to the bathroom, but we have them splitting between the two. And also, just pay attention to the focus on the manual. So a lot of times, there's a lot of, like what you saw on Flickr was a lot of sort of handheld signs and handheld blackouts and things like that. It's a focus on the manual, a focus on the man-made, focus on the theatrical. And it's also done in here too with holding of lamps and sort of objects that are set, but they're props. We call that video puppeteering. But
She left me because she wanted to. She's not that strong. She had to do it. You mean to push me away? Do you really think that's possible? She couldn't have done it. No, she was taken from me by force. It's the only explanation that makes sense. What could she be running from? Or is she running to someone? Do you think that's it? What are you? I need documentation of everything. You understand for your side of the story. And you look nice on the bed like that. I feel like shit.
When are you going to do the next piece about me, Gary?
I don't know. Because I looked in all the papers and there wasn't anything about us. About Kate, or me, or anything. I'm afraid everyone will forget. I don't know. Because people's memories don't last long. I can ask my editor. It's all a matter of timing. Can you tilt your face towards the light a little bit more?
I feel upset. Do I look upset?
I wish there was something I could do for you. Is there someone there? Gary, I heard someone at the door. I didn't hear anything. I'm sure I did. Do you see anything? No. No, there's nothing.
after House of Moore, we began to think about expanding our practice and our research. So we moved into serial projects and other types of projects. The titles of them, and we'll show these a little bit. Dead Set, which was a serial project that we started in 2006. There was a participatory project called The People, which is ongoing, and more of a collaborative framework called Cinema Fury, in which we collaborated with musicians and other artists and created work together. It states that right there. Did you want to show Dead Set?
No, you can just mention it, but we won't show
Okay. This is a little bit of Dead Set. This is a performance that we did that exists more of a sequence of notes. So there's modulars. It's a modular performance. It's less linear and less narrative than the other performances. Each Dead Set is a copy and alteration of the one before. There is no Dead Set number 1. As a series, it started with Dead Set number 2. And we were beginning to think about this idea of the copy, so that there was no longer an original, or you weren't able to find the original, and all you had was the remnants of it. We were organized this around the topic of looking at trauma and the experience of trauma and how we experience. Again, this was coming out of the wars in Afghanistan, and at that time you had, for the first time in our history, direct video copies on YouTube of soldiers and mercenaries in war, so that you had access as a viewer to, what was the name of the? Blackwater mercenaries, and they were posting their videos of actually live war events online, and it was sort of unprecedented access, because before that the government would censor, of course, anything that was happening within the army. So again, we were thinking about what it means to look at trauma, what it means to experience trauma in that way, and yeah. Okay, we're just going to skip that. We're just going a little bit faster because we wanted to have time for questions, and we wanted to get to some of the other projects. So we're just going to go quickly through some of these more recent projects. And as a response to Dead Set, we made SOS in 2008. And that was, again, thinking about the concept of the rite of spring and the concept of sacrifice, and how we as a society, when we're saturated with so much, when we have so much and we consume so much, what it means to have a new beginning and the danger of a clean slate. There were 3 sort of sets of storylines, 3 kinds of characters in this piece, but none of them were human. There were a set of animals that were lost in a forest that was disappearing. Their environment was becoming more and more constricted, and they were becoming extinct. There were 2 profiles, which are kind of internet characters who are confronting the boundaries of their constricted space, and they're wanting a clean restart of their world, a reboot. And there were some radical revolutionaries who run a media company and are preparing for the ultimate restart of society. Because the idea of this was a celebration, and the Rite of Spring was the idea of a village coming together to celebrate the beginning of the new, but in that creating a sacrifice, we started our dramaturgical process by throwing parties in Brooklyn. We threw a kind of art party with a party art atmosphere. We did that for several months. That's how we built the piece. And in those performances, we didn't tell people, but we were rehearsing pieces of script. We were inviting collaborators to come. We were testing out costume ideas. And we didn't do this as a kind of like, now you're going to see a show or now you're going to see a performance, but things just happened over the course of the evening, and the audience reacted and interacted with it as they wanted to do. The whole stream of the evening and of the series of the evenings was, again, keeping with this idea of the performance of a ritual. When we created the performance, we sought to extend this atmosphere into the theatrical space, to blur the ending of the play into the real life. Also, because of that, we had done that party. We also toured, it was called the Actions Party. We toured that to some international venues, and the party took a life of its own a little bit. For a little while, we did that. There was, as you saw sort of coming out of Dead Set, there were multiple screens on stage. There was layered live screen imagery, so that actors were filming other actors and their video backgrounds and reprojecting that, and again, playing with that idea of saturation and collage. And there was a lot going on in the performance. The idea was as you saw before, even when we were doing shelf life, but how much could we overload the viewer and how could we force them into making choices about what kind of information they were going to pay attention to or not. There was a lot of sound, a lot of video, a lot of synesthesia, and a lot of overload.
You can play it, yeah.
This just gives you an idea of one of the sections.
Oh my god, I'm so boring. This is so boring, I'm so bored. This TV is making me so boring.
Oh, fully. I love TV.
Oh, me too. I watch it all the time, like all the hours of the day.
Yeah? Have you seen that new reality situation infomercial thing? Realness?
Serving realness?
No, it's called Realness. Or something. It's like this geopolitical global news broadcast. It's fake, but it's like really real. It's about these people and they're like a cult and they're trying to convince everyone to like, prepare for the invasion. But you know, I don't think it's an invasion. It's like an invasion from the inside.
Like an infection.
I guess so. It's super political and mental and totally campy and heavy and ridiculous and meaningless, and I love it, love, fully love.
Me too, I know. I love it. I watch it. I can't stop watching it.
Well, I started watching from the pilot.
Me too. I was on it. I was on the pre-pilot on the website before pre-launch.
Oh, stop stealing my life!
I love burritos. Are you the friend? Did you link to them?
Who?
The realness people on their virtual network?
Oh, of course. I was like in their top 10 friends from the first beta.
I was the alpha tester of the first experience.
Well, I wrote the first subscription email HTML link.
I wrote the first meta review.
Well, the whole thing is based on an idea that I had back in grade school.
The whole thing is based on a personal profile of me from when I was just a baby, selected from billions of people on planet Earth, and is a copy of my nervous system encoded.
I own it!
In 2007, and it's a project that's ongoing, we created a participatory project called The People. Again, this is sort of a political reaction during the Bush regime and the idea of spreading democracy. We were thinking about democracy and the many meanings of it, and we wanted to explore that with the communities that we were touring to. So by this time, we'd been touring internationally for several years. And we had this experience of going to many different countries and towns and villages and cities and having interactions with people. And we wanted to sit down for a while and longer and think about these problems and discuss this and incorporate the people that we were encountering into our projects. We chose the Oresteia because it's considered a foundational text of justice and democracy, and so we sort of retold it in this performance piece. It was a live theater spectacle with large-scale real-time video projection on buildings, usually in the public square, on community buildings. There's a series of interviews that happen before the performance takes place where we talk to people about their ideas of community, of justice, of war, of terrorism, and we edit those responses, and that becomes the Greek chorus of the piece. So this is what the piece looked like. We've taken it to several different countries in Terre de Welt, in Polverigi, Italy was where it started, which was a experimental theater festival that's been going on since the 80s. Austria, San Francisco, Portland, and we just did it last year in the Lower East Side in New York. We were thinking about the relationship between the mass media and private exchange, and so part of what happens in the piece is that there's people inside the building and their conversations and is being videotaped and simulcast on the outside of the building. So you have this experience of watching what's happening inside and outside at the same time and exploring the boundary between the private and the public. This picture here is where we did it in Halle in former East Germany. And it was interesting because we performed it in two cities in that festival in that country. And one of them was the former sort of old town, the university town. This was the former factory town, and this particular building was where the Stasi headquarters had been. It was now the tax office. And it was just interesting in doing a sort of site-specific piece, a participatory piece. When we were building the piece, we would walk around and ask people, what are these rooms? There were rooms with foot-thick doors or large implements on the ceiling, and people would just sort of tell us they didn't know. In 2012, we did a piece called Broke House, which is a return to the group work at the Abrams Art Center here in New York. We were thinking about the symptoms of the US foreclosures, crises, credit crises, Occupy movements, and extremist rhetoric. It's loosely based on Three Sisters, a Chekhov, and the documentary Grey Gardens, and it's about a family that loses their house. In the course of the performance, the house is torn down by the family itself, and they wrap it around themselves as sculptural objects, as costumes. For the most part, we make our work in New York here. We perform in New York maybe once a year or every other year, but we're involved in other activities as well, which Caden will talk about in a moment. But we've toured the work internationally to venues and festivals worldwide. This is just a small list of the places that we've been. The mode of the production of the company has expanded a little bit as the company has matured, and we're always tinkering with the process. We don't have a set way of working with every production. We approach it differently as our needs change and as we want to build it. So as I said before, when we wanted to work with communities, we would do that. But even the way we approach writing a script or working with the technology, it always changes with every project.
Just a little bit about working with media. Bonnie asked us to sort of break it down a little bit. You know, we strive for true integration. When we're making a piece, we always start with video, with all the technology in the room, because it's a performer, and it actually changes the way we work. We oftentimes are working from mistakes, so we break the technology and we use that as the sort of structure. We've developed our own vocabulary. We don't really care about what the actual definition is in the room. We just make it up. So we say things like super close-up, super far shot. Our close-ups aren't like a close-up on when you're shooting a movie. We have a close-up is the chest up, or a long shot, or far shot is knees up, and things like that. We create space for discovery when we're working. We work as an ensemble. Oftentimes, Jim and I have come up with an idea, and Gemma has made a script, and we are working from that script, but we'll put that script aside and do other things with the company and then send that back to Gemma, and then Gemma sometimes incorporates that in. I mean, or not. But SOS began that way, in that we, you know, in these performance parties, but also in rehearsal, I would give the company $5 each and send them to the party store and say, come back with something you could survive on for a week. How would you use these things in the store to sort of survive? Oh, I'll just say it quickly. Tools we use are DSLR cameras, camera phones, professional cameras. We also use mostly consumer, or we did in the beginning. We use a little more prosumer now stuff. Video editing software, iMovie, After Effects, Premiere. We really will use anything we can to make the work as fast as possible. And then we use, if you don't know these things, Isadora, Max, Modulate, Lumen, which is a little bit new. And then sort of the other work we've been doing as we have moved, well, as the company has matured and we've moved in past our 15th year, is more field work, more sort of supporting the field of contemporary performance. We always found it hard to be in New York and making our work because we get slotted into this idea of theater, which we don't really consider ourselves in theater. It's more contemporary performance. It's a sort of moving fluidly between different kinds of genres, so theater, dance, video art, new media, things like that. And so we started contemporaryperformance.com because we thought, okay, we'll just define it for everybody. And defined by gathering a group of artists together and having them sort of present what they do as contemporary performance, and then it's defined by example. So we started the Contemporary Performance Network. In 2010, it's contemporaryperformance.org. It's a network to join. It's free. It doesn't matter. You make profiles. You show your work. We post. I try and post as my sort of morning thing when I'm looking all the opportunities I see, so that people can see how we've worked and the opportunities that we've used and then we've seen. We just use those and post those. And then other people are, since that, it's like 6,000 people, artists, festivals, foundations, companies from 81 countries on the network. And everyone is now posting opportunities and looking for collaborators and things like that. We also, at the same time, because you have to, made a Facebook fan page with around 60,000 people, and that sort of goes back and forth with opportunities and things like that. We started the Contemporary Performance Almanac. In our experience touring, presenters, you know, how do you tour? How do you, everyone always wants to know how you tour. There isn't really an answer to that, but It's different for everyone when they start touring or how they start touring. But the one thing we've seen is that presenters can get in a kind of tunnel vision because presenters work with their collaborators to share expenses with artists. So some artists like us, like we'll be invited by a presenter and they'll call up their sort of circuit and say, I'm bringing these artists, do you want to join in? Then we can sort of share the costs. And then you tour like 4 or 5 places. But then you have these groups of artists who are just touring like this and all the presenters are going across and only seeing those. So we thought, okay, we'll just do an open source crowdfunded book of people that the presenters don't know, and then we'll just use that and mail 200 presenters this book, and also make an app from it, which we did last year, and we're just closing today the entrance for this year's one, the Almanac 15. And then the other thing we did is we started a small sort of festival during the APAP season in January 8th through the 12th, I think it is this year, just focusing on what we think is exciting, radical, experimental, small, tourable. And we present that, and our main focus for that is not press. We don't try and get press for the artists, but we do try and get presenters there because we know them and we can say, we like these people, which is something presenters are always asking artists when they're touring. Who's good, who's new, who do you like? So this is our chance to be able to do that in a sort of more concrete fashion. But we're interested in sort of showing these people to academic writers for journals, presenters, and other artists. And then the other thing we do is we publish sort of our critical writing. So we publish in PAJ and Theater Magazine and things like that. That's contemporary performance. That's the book. Those are my hands. It'll flip through in a second. It was big. It's really heavy. Bonnie has a copy if you want to look at it. Anyway. That's it. We're done.
So we just wanted to end and open it up to questions. If anybody has questions or discussion points that you want to talk about.
That's yours up there.
Yep.
I want to know like more about the sound. How do you use the sound like a tool in your pieces? And what kind of software do you use?
Sure.
That's Gemma.
He had, I mean, I think this is a small enough room, but he had a question about the sound. This is also in the video.
Okay.
My question is, how do you use sound as a tool? And yeah, that's my question. What kind of software do you use?
So I use, mainly to play the sound live, I use Ableton Live. And I was an early adopter of Ableton, and actually they profiled me. I had a good relationship with them. They profiled me on their website back in the day. I create the sound with musicians. I create the sound by myself. I use sound editing programs, Logic. I do field recordings. The approach to the sound is multifold. In some ways, I'm thinking about making a soundtrack for the piece. So I'm using it to play with those tropes of underscoring emotion in the piece, but I'm often using it as an interruption, and I'm exaggerating sound effects, and as you heard, like knocking on the door or the hanging up of the phone or something like that. Again, to challenge the viewer's perception and understanding of what it is they're watching and what they're giving focus to, and are they watching a live event or a recorded event. And it's again that idea of language and information, and what is it that they're privileging, how are they understanding that. In addition, the text, especially for House of No More, was written, I think, very rhythmically in terms of the spoken word and in terms of the text too. So we don't have a copy of it, but the text has notes written in it and symbols written in it for sound events. So one important thing to know about our performances is that they're not called by a stage manager as you will typically see in a theater. The performance happens and everything is choreographed and timed, and it's working. I play sound live with the performers, and there's video editors that are also working live with performers, and everything happens on cues based on text that happens, a video change that happens, so that once the show starts, it goes and it breaks and it runs as it will, but there's no stopping it. We do very little pre-recording, it just happens. We try and make any kind of recording that we have very short, so that we're always moving from moment to moment.
How did you find your performers, and how did you collaborate with them?
When we first started, I asked people that I knew, and we were looking for a mix of sort of skilled or trained performers, actors, dancers, and then also, what do you call them?
Informal.
Informal performers. So people who are working at, who are performing all the time. You know, this very New York kind of performer who's performing on the street, who's being performative. So it's a mixture of those, and then we had to build a sort of training for them, because and the reason why we built an ensemble is because we could develop a training regiment for them, because this is a very specific way of performing in this sort of double event of live and mediated. And then as we continued, then we started to actually do every year, the beginning of every project, we'll do an open call, trying to sort of throw the net out and not get too insular.
In terms of redefining the language that you use, how does that work with the people that you collaborate with? Like, do you sort of hope for some kind of miscommunication, or do you have a certain thing that you're trying to accomplish, so you have to explain yourself to the people that you collaborate with?
Well, I mean, again, it's an ensemble, and the reason for making an ensemble is you don't have to explain yourself, because there's already a language that's been developed, a vocabulary, really. A lot of the sort of failure in the piece is built into the structure of how it works. So am I answering your question? Yeah, okay, good.
And part of the benefit of having the ensemble, or having people that you regularly collaborate with, is that they can then teach the new people, so that you can have new people come in and they don't have to know the language, but you can have these experienced ones who can translate it for them, and translate it in the way they understand it as a performer or as a sound artist or musician or however it is that they are, and they can communicate in that way. So we do also hope for, we always have an opportunity for people to bring things of their own and to bring their own invention into the piece, and we've relied on that more and more as we've built the ensemble of collaborating with people's specialties and saying, here's an opportunity, we want to do this, or we want to give you a task of accomplishing this, and seeing what you'll bring to it. Yeah, go ahead.
So in the first performance that you guys showed us, you said that you guys were switching genders and races, and exchanging wigs. Can you talk a bit more about that, and how, and your reasons for doing that, but also how you did it as well?
Well, we have, it kind of sort of happened because the company was diverse. So there's, in that company, I mean, Vivian is Asian, and Willie was African American, and Rebecca's Puerto Rican, and John is Asian. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But it's diverse, and we wanted to talk about how identity became slippery in this sort of mediated environment, and to talk about how we can create cyborgs. You know, if you think about sort of the Wooster Group, not now, but up until, I would say, House Lights, they very much were focused on this political engagement of deconstruction, right? Ripping apart the meaning of these sort of set ideas. And I felt like when we got to making work, that as queer artists, we were more interested in a kind of making a reflection of ourselves, building, using all those pieces that had fallen, and sort of building this new world, right? This new world of liquid identity, of oscillating identity, and also to embrace the idea that we're monstrous, in that if you think about, and I'll get to defining that in a second, if you think about that we're making these cyborgs and that we consider ourselves monsters, it's because we consider ourselves out of bounds. We don't really fit into certain parameters, certain sort of buckets for identity. And so, I mean, that's we say monsters in that it's.
In a positive sense.
Huh?
In a positive.
And yeah, in a positive sense. Does that help? Yeah. Good.
Can you address the queerness of your work and how that impacts your thinking, your production, the images, the subversiveness, this liquid identity, the monstrous in a positive sense? And where is this today? Where are we going with queerness in 2014 from your perspective?
Sure. I mean, I'll answer a part of that. I mean, I think that in one small part of it, a response was in the language. So the idea of encoding language and decoding language and using language that might be understood one way by one viewer and a different way by another viewer. So we were often playing with that idea of meaning and what's communicated both among the characters themselves and to the audience members. And interrupting that and trying to think about meaning in a different way, so that you might be watching this as a TV sitcom or as a play that's happening, but there's something that's corrosive under the surface or that is more disturbing under the surface, and that there might be hinted at other meanings, again, this idea of coding and decoding. Queerness for me, I grew up in the Bay Area in the 90s, and there was a political moment where queer and queer nation came to the fore, and there was the adoption of the word queer, and it was a great new phrase and new idea to talk about things that were out of bounds, that were boundaryless, or that were undefinable. For me, that's the way I interpreted it, and I really like that. So that queerness could be not a container, but a non-container. It could be something, a cloud of something else. I feel like now it's become more codified, and it has become attached to political meanings. So I've moved away from the idea of queerness in that historical sense. I think we both have in a bit. But also what's happened over the last 10 years, 15 years too, is that I think for everyone the idea of identity has really shifted radically as we become engaged with our online selves, and the idea of promoting ourselves through social networks, promoting ourselves through sharing, through our phones. We didn't have that kind of, we didn't have those kinds of tools a way ago. And so I think we think about ourselves in a much more fractured way now. We think about a self that we share with our coworkers, a self that we share with our family, a self that we share with other people only in the virtual world or only in the cloud, things like that. So that idea has really, I don't know if there's a term for that now yet. I think that it's really expanded, and I think that's exciting to think about. And so our work is attempting to grapple with that now, to come with this much larger field of what the possibilities are out there.
That was great. I mean, one thing we would say is that, 2 years ago we went on hiatus because we felt like we got to a point of our research in this that this discussion of identity and the way that we were manifesting it, we had come to an end, right? And we're now making
for ourselves.
And we're now beginning to make work which is, I think, a lot more diffuse, and it doesn't really fit into almost even to a theatrical space. We're making pieces with apps and that kind of thing. So, like, if you think about sort of the idea of networked identity and this multiplicity of avatars, then I feel like queerness is somewhere in there, and the failure of that. Yes.
Yep.
What issues are you going to tackle next? You talked a bit about, the phone being the spy and about the value of private information. Were you hinting at a new project, or I'm curious to see what's next?
Well, we have one project that's upcoming, which is not yet explicitly about that, although part of the topic of it is thinking about gun violence. And although, unfortunately, gun violence in America has become a very persistent problem, and it's become chronic in a way, well, you can tell your story. My family is living in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, and years ago there was the Littleton Massacre, Columbine Massacre, and then just last year I was home and there was another shooting basically 2 blocks down the street. And these kind of outbreaks of gun violence are happening again and again. Caden is from rural Texas, and he was visiting his father. And
oh yeah, well my dad used to be a cop, so I visit, this is a couple of years ago, I get in the car, we're gonna make this trip where we visit all my relatives because I haven't been home in 5 years. And it's this little Toyota truck, and I ask him, it's piled full of stuff, and I ask him, how many guns are, because I can't see any guns. How many guns are in the car, Dad? Oh, 5. No, 6, 5 are loaded. But, and then also other things, I mean, there's lots of actually gun death in my closed circuit of being at home, and also in my family, accidents and murders. And, but the way that we're making that piece is using phones, and Gemma has a degree in statistics. So we're using a lot of data now. For now, how we're starting out is that we're making a sort of video game in a space where playing the video game in its many levels, which is historical, like what is the history of guns in America? Each level, 7 levels, is a section of that history, and it becomes harder and harder for you to ethically win or play even. So, and we're not still sure how much of that is in a live space, how much of that is in a network space, but that's where we're beginning. And now it's great that I'm teaching at Carnegie Mellon because they have a huge computer science. So we've already started working with people there. So.
You guys said looking is an act of violence. Could you talk a little bit more about that and like what is victimized by looking?
Sure, we were talking about that in terms of shelf life.
No, that's Flickr.
Okay. So we were talking about that in terms of Flickr, the piece that we did over 10 years ago. And we were thinking about the horror film, and specifically about the horror genre, and we were thinking about the capturing of someone's image and the rendering of that in editing. And so how we take, it goes back more to that idea of identity, of how we take an identity from someone, and we might use that identity against their will or against the way that they intend it to be used. We consider ourselves, and this is tied with the project previously, Shelf Life, when we were talking about the idea of looking as an act of consumption, but we consider ourselves voracious image eaters as well as image producers. So it's really the beginning of that era when we started to think about creating images of ourselves and sharing them, and then getting into the editing of that and the truncating of that, and how that could be a violent act. Yep.
So I'm just curious with the rise of personal involvement in like a cyber identity that's kind of happened over the course of the last 10 years, what effect that's had on kind of your perceptions and your work in terms of like one's own kind of creation of their identity.
So in Dead Set, which we didn't show, we focused on this story. I call it a love story. Some people wouldn't call it that. Did you ever hear about this cannibal in Berlin? So this is even before social media. He's using, I don't remember which year this is. He was a cannibal, and he really wanted to eat someone. And he was on listservs. This is just listservs. It's probably like AOL listservs. This is how far back it is. And he really wanted to eat someone. He didn't really want to kill them. He just wanted to eat their flesh. And he found someone on a listserv through the internet, the beauty of the internet, bringing 2 people who had very specific needs together. And he wanted to be eaten. So they met. They discussed it. They had tea. They made an appointment for later on the next week. The guy came back out. There was a bit of difficulty killing him because the cannibal didn't really want to kill him and wasn't sure how. He filmed the whole thing. He then finally did kill him and bleed him out and then cut him up and froze him and then ate him for a couple of months. And when he then started looking for someone else through the internet and freaked a kid out, and the kid called the cops. The cops came, they found him, they found leftover meat, they arrested him. They couldn't put him in jail because there's no law for that. So that's kind of the way the sort of networked internet works, and the creation of identity and things like that. That it in some ways it solves a need, and in some ways it sort of circumnavigates all the laws. In a way, we have to keep making new laws to sort of constrict people. Yeah.
You might have already kind of answered this question, but what would you say your ideal space to produce work is at this point? Would you keep it in the realm of technology, or would you ever consider getting into another live space again? But you already seem to have this barrier of the screens between your audience and your performers, so I was just curious about what your ideal space would be at this point.
I think that's something we're still trying to figure out in making new work. The theatrical space feels flaccid to me. It feels unproductive and not really reflective of our world. And I think you can see that a lot of times in the sort of push towards participatory nature, because that's how we are now. We're all creating sort of ourselves and media and sending it to everyone. And for us, I think that work has to embrace that space. But how physical is that space? I mean, that's something we'll grapple with in the next piece. Yeah.
Do you think by having so many of your performances viewed through a screen, even though in a lot of them you can see the actors behind it, do you think you, by doing this, are breaking the fourth wall or putting up sort of a fifth wall?
We're creating a new space for critical thinking. We are asking the audience members to edit the space that they're watching. So people often say we know that there is a constraint on the audiences. There's actually a physiological effect called the orienteering effect, where your eye is drawn to rapid movement. So you see a screen and you are compelled to watch it. So that's a feature that we have as humans that's built into us that we exploit. So we're playing with, when we're doing these simultaneous performances and you're seeing things on the screen, you're seeing live actors, and you're also seeing, the videos don't show you as well, but there's also things happening on the sides of the stage. We're challenging you to think about like what it is that you're watching at a specific time and how you're creating a narrative of what you're watching, the event that you're watching on stage. So there's always, you could watch the dominant narrative, you could watch the film, the real-time film that's spooling out before you, or you can be assembling your own information stream. So it's not really about breaking a fourth wall, which is sort of a theatrical term, or creating a fifth wall, but it's really about punching through into a whole new realm of what we call about sort of rewriting reality. So that we're hopefully challenging your perception to then think in a different way, that maybe it persists with you a little bit when you leave the performance space, when you leave the theater, or when you're then browsing at home or looking on your phone or just looking at the world around you. Great. Thank you so much.